Good evening and welcome to another episode of Love Not Fear. I'm Jack Cox, author of Love Not Fear.
And I am the amazing Annie Day, and Orgasmic Health and your guide to feeling fabulous fast.
Right, well, I suppose we ought to start just very briefly by congratulating Liz Truss on becoming our latest unelected number 10 overlord to represent the World Economic Forum and totally disregard our interests.
Oh, yeah, just...
And if you want to find out a better
I can't say anything that would be repeatable on YouTube about this situation, so I'll just go...
If you want to find out a better way of doing politics and the economy and society in general,
yeah,
Love Not Fear.
Yeah, and we could be using a blockchain system where the candidates that would like to govern us have to do a manifesto, and as soon as they stray from doing what we the people ask them to do in that manifesto, they're sacked. End of.
Yeah,
it would make people a lot more honest and a lot more authentic about what they really intend to do.
We didn't have blockchain when I wrote Love Not Fear.
No, I'm just saying
that,
that,
I suggest in here that we use an earlier technology, chip and pin,
yeah,
where everybody in the country has one vote and the politicians have the same number of votes as the people they represent, less the number of people who vote for themselves in that debate.
Oh, like it.
And I can write the software for that in 5 minutes.
Well, Jack Cox,
very simple.
I've got another job for you then.
Anyway, that's not what we're going to talk about tonight.
We're talking about giants.
You know, tonight we're going to talk about giants.
Indeed.
And I've made, as usual, I've made a few notes, which I will do my best to read out without making it too obvious. I'm reading from notes.
That'd be good.
I spent all day preparing this, so I'm hoping it's going to be good. And bear with me if I don't actually put this talk up for a day or two, because I want to add all the pictures, all the images.
Yeah,
which
there's
I won't
so
have
many when I was researching it, incredible amounts.
I won't be able to do today using Zoom share screen. It's just too much.
No. But you know what? We can catch up on YouTube when you do it. Just give us the heads up when it's done, darling.
Give me a couple of days.
Okay.
Right, the Book of Genesis. Let's just follow on from what we've been talking about the last 2 or 3 weeks, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
The Book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Hebrew Bible, tells the story of an ancient race called the Nephilim.
Yep, that's the ones.
We've talked about these before.
Indeedy.
The story of the Nephilim giants is further elaborated in the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, there's loads on the Book of Enoch. Absolutely loads.
The Book of Enoch calls them the Watchers.
Yeah.
And in previous shows, we've said, were these Watchers the same as the ones that the Hebrew Bible calls the Elohim?
Yeah.
The powerful ones, which often gets mistranslated as God. It doesn't mean that at all.
No.
And also the ones that the Sumerians call the Anunnaki.
Yeah.
Okay. And the story tells of how the Watchers interbred with the women of Earth, the daughters of man.
Yeah.
To produce a race of giants called the Nephilim.
Indeedy.
And were the Nephilim the same race as giants that the Greeks called the Titans?
And there's so many images, and as you've already said, there's so many photographs, isn't there?
Yeah.
Of of giants that can be authenticated really easily, but also the architecture, Jack, all over the world where they've got giant archways.
Going into that later. Going into that
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. It's a conversation. It's not a monologue.
Okay.
Now, we talk about interbreeding.
Yeah.
And I've said before, and I did an extra show last Friday because my guest had to postpone. So
Okay.
I went into it in more detail there.
Yeah.
The ancient stories were written in the vocabulary of the day.
Absolutely.
And they talked about interbreeding. If they wrote about it today, would they be talking about producing hybrids and in vitro fertilization and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, rather than physical.
Because you think about it logically, if the daughters of men had produced a race of giants, the mothers would not have survived the birth.
Oh, absolutely. They'd all have had to have a cesarean sections, to say the bloody least. But also their human capacity within the womb wouldn't have had enough room to fit a giant in.
No, I don't think so. Hello, Cheryl. Lovely
Hi,
to have you.
Cheryl.
So were these early interbreeding experiments? And were they experiments that went wrong?
And did the giants have giant parents?
Oh.
They must have done, mustn't they? If they were born in a biological fashion, shall we say?
Yeah, I think we can probably, if we're going to assume that the Nephilim were produced by interbreeding of human females and possibly extraterrestrial, possibly early human civilization. We talked about this before. We didn't draw any conclusions. Sure. Then we can assume that those genes were passed into the gene pool.
Yep.
Which could explain some of the giants that we've seen since.
Yeah, and there are people being born today that are, you know, much taller than 6 foot.
Now, it's important to note that there is a quite normal human condition called gigantism, which is a condition characterized by excessive growth and height, significantly above the average. It is caused by an overproduction of a growth hormone in childhood and produces people from 8 to 9 feet in height.
Yeah.
Now, we know that exists. Doesn't account for all of them.
Yeah, sure.
It's also known that there is a wide range of variety in the height of human beings, both today and throughout history.
Yeah, sure.
Anyone who's visited any of the old sailing ships, such as HMS Victory in Portsmouth, knows how short the people were in the times of Nelson.
Yeah, absolutely. And you only have to visit places like Indonesia and China. You know, when I went to North China, I'm a giant compared to most people, and yet I'm really only 5'1". But compared to the Chinese women and men, I was a head taller than them. So I do, and I know when I've visited Indonesia, that's where my daughter-in-law's from, that all their family are tiny. So, you know, that's how they are naturally. And there must be the other end of the scale as well, the Scandinavian men and women who are, you know, completely, you know, head and shoulders above the height that you would expect for, let's say, Europeans or whatever.
Now, if the giants were descended from the Nephilim, we would expect to be able to find evidence in their DNA, wouldn't we?
Yep.
I don't know whether those tests have ever been done. If they have been, then the results have never been released.
Oh, they've got them, my precious.
If they were a result of gigantism, then it would not be genetic. There'd be no evidence in the
Yeah,
DNA.
absolutely.
If they were simply extremes of normal height, then that would be expected to be mirrored in the genes.
Yeah.
What about pygmies, such as the hunter-gatherers of the Congo Basin?
Absolutely.
No one is suggesting that they are not fully human.
Exactly.
They're just families of short people.
Mm-hmm.
So could at least some of the giants simply be families of tall people?
Absolutely.
Maybe it's nothing to get too excited about at all.
Maybe it is. Any excuse to get excited, Jack, I'm up for. Yeah.
we know you like getting excited, Annie. So without assuming we know the cause in every case,
Yeah.
let's take a look at some of the evidence.
Right. I'm all for evidence.
So let's look at the Sumerian civilization,
yeah,
which began about 8,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in previous shows.
Yeah, indeed, darling.
It tells of a race of giants that ruled over the Sumerians, and there are many depictions of them. And we've talked about the Sumerian kings list.
Yeah.
We've said that the earlier ones were very long lived. The later ones were much shorter lived.
Yeah.
So if they were a hybrid between the Sumerians and the Anunnaki,
yeah,
then again we were into the Nephilim, aren't we?
Yeah.
Whatever they called them in Sumeria.
And there's so many cultures that refer to giants quite openly.
All over the world.
You know, it's not just in Europe, it's America, Canada, the Arctic, you know, everywhere has got
all over the world.
Ideas about there being giants.
Sumerians talk about their king Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe, a lot of current archaeologists and historians believe that Gilgamesh was a real person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who ruled for 126 years.
Yeah.
He was one of the later names in the Sumerian kings list.
Yeah.
And as we discussed before, if there was a handover of power from the Sumerians from the Anunnaki to the Sumerians, maybe through a hybrid race, then Gilgamesh may well have been the first hybrid to rule.
And what about Goliath in the Bible?
Yeah, it's another one. That's another one.
I really believe that story happened. It's too, I don't know, I don't think that's just a made-up story. I don't think it's a made-up story. Really was Goliath.
I don't think it's a made-up story, Annie, but I'm not that familiar with the Goliath story. Maybe you can elaborate. Was he a one-off? Were the other members of his tribe shorter? Or was he from a gigantic tribe? Because I think that's the crux here, isn't it? If they're one-offs, then they may be the result of gigantism.
Yeah.
If they're part of a gigantic
But if they're more than that, the Philistines were the same height as Goliath, as far as I know. This is from Andrew. The Philistines were the same height as Goliath.
Good.
That would say that that's a racial feature, wouldn't it? That those people are born like that.
In ancient Egypt, there are hundreds of depictions of giants, and the Egyptian records describe the old pharaoh dynasties to be very, very tall.
Yeah.
Also, and we've dealt with this elsewhere, so I won't go into it in depth now, but some of the pharaohs were coneheads.
Yeah.
With red hair.
Indeed.
And the red hair theme.
You know it. The red hair's the winner.
the red hair theme comes out later on in this talk when we talk about some of the things that have been found in North America.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 1881, let's get the date right, Professor Tillerman, 1881, let's get the date, exploring the ruins of an ancient temple of Isis on the banks of the Nile. He opened a row of tombs in which some prehistoric race of giants had been buried. The smallest skeleton, made of around 60 of them, was guesstimated to be between 7 and 8 feet.
Yeah, absolutely.
The largest was 11 feet 1 inch.
Yeah.
That's pretty big.
And again, if that's part of your, I don't know what we would call this, if that's part of your ethnic vibration that you're born that tall, then there won't be any evidence as such, will there, of any, what shall I say, interference as such?
There won't be evidence of interference if it's part of the normal human range, which we discussed earlier on.
Yeah, yeah.
Which it may well be, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't. As I say, well, it's the same when you talk about the pygmies. I mean, you examine their DNA, you can find genes for being short.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're still alive today.
Indeed.
According to the German newspaper Bild in 1988, entrepreneur and treasure hunter Grigor Spory allegedly came across something rather incredible in Egypt, a 15-inch mummified finger. And I'm going to show all the pictures in the YouTube version of this. I'm not going to try to do it live because it's just going to take
too long. And also, do you know about the Fibonacci code? So if you get the measurement of my little finger, you will then be able to determine how long my arm is and what my height is from that.
Yes,
so there's something quite significant about that, isn't there?
Of course, yeah. So apparently he found it in an undisclosed, a secret tomb in Giza somewhere. And it was found by a local grave robber.
Yeah.
The finger is nearly 14 inches long, and if it is genuine, it belonged to someone estimated to have been between 15 and 16 feet tall.
Yeah. That would make sense, wouldn't it, with the Fibonacci measurements, basically? The
grave robber claimed, and I'm not saying any of this is true, the grave robber claimed to have a certificate to say that the finger was authentic, as well as an X-ray.
Yeah.
Now, who would have authenticated that? Who would have given such a certificate? I don't know. But anyway, that's what the story says.
A pathologist, maybe?
Later, when Spory returned to Egypt to purchase the finger, the grave robber had buggered off.
Oh, there's a thing. We didn't see that one coming.
Leaving us only with photographs of the finger.
Yeah.
I don't even think we have the X-ray anymore. So
yeah,
it may be.
You know, I do wonder about how much the dark cabal have hidden all this evidence, because they've hidden the evidence for lots of other things as well. So why would they want us to know about our origins? Why would they want us to know the true nature of the earth that we live on and the beings that have lived there? They wouldn't really, would they?
I don't know that, Annie, but the thing that I can't get over, and I don't mean to insult anybody's religious beliefs here. As I said before, I'm not here to tell anybody else what to believe.
No, we're just giving some of our own insights.
Yeah, okay. But the system, the elite, whatever you want to call them,
let's not call them that.
They are overlords.
The dark overlords.
Our dark overlords have used the Christian religion for the last couple of thousand years to push their ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
So why would they not want us to believe something which is in the Bible?
Because there is only that one reference to Goliath. There's no other references to giants.
The Nephilim.
Yeah. There is only that
All the
one
stories
reference.
of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
In Genesis.
Yeah.
Why would
But also they hide, you know, we're told that we shouldn't be using crystals, and yet it goes into quite a lot of detail to the breastplate of King Solomon and his shield as well. And it tells you what carnelian's good for, what ruby's good for, blah, 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 blah. But then every so often we'll be told that it's not Christian and we shouldn't be doing it, and it's da 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 da.
Yeah, but why would they want to repress stories? Why would they want to repress stories of giants?
Why would they want to hide?
I'd be there saying, hey, look, it's in the Bible, so the rest of the Bible must be true, and using it as evidence.
But then the Bible was written by different people, wasn't it?
No, I'm not saying the Bible's true. I'm not saying the Bible's true. I'm saying, wouldn't they want us to believe that?
But what I'm saying is, Jack, you're saying you don't understand why they would hide it. They would hide it because they have no intention of letting us know the true nature of where we live and the magic and mysticism that is part of our earth. So they wouldn't want us to know about giants or anything else, really,
No.
would they?
Well, let's move on.
Ordinary. Okay.
Every American tribe, this is what you were saying earlier, every American tribe tells of the times when giants used to rule North America.
Yeah.
And there were brutal wars between the Native Americans and the giants.
Yeah.
Groups of giants who had red hair. This is going back to the red hair have been found on the pharaohs.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of the pharaohs. And the Native Americans fought them to extinction. Well, maybe not quite, but they thought they had.
Okay.
The existence of giants could certainly explain some of the massive megalithic structures around the world.
Indeed. Why would they need to have such enormous doorways when we are a lot shorter than that? You wouldn't need it, really, would you?
Yeah, we did all this a couple of weeks ago, so I don't want to go into too much detail about it again now. But we talked before about the stone of the south at Baalbek,
yeah,
in Lebanon, which weighs over 1,000 tons. It's estimated to weigh 1,240 tons. And the three stones known collectively as the Trithelon, which weigh 750 tons each, estimated. Yeah. Okay. There were many stone movers in the ancient world.
Yeah.
From Stonehenge to Machu Picchu. Ancient people found a way to move stones of massive proportions. The Olmec of Central America moved enormous stone heads. The Inca created mountaintop kingdoms out of enormous, yet intricately fitted stones, each dragged for dozens of miles. The Easter Islanders carved and moved some of the largest stone sculptures ever created.
Yeah. And there is a book called, what's it called? The Powerhouse at Giza. And
Yeah.
he says that it's because there were tiny bits of clear quartz crystal in them, and they use sonic resonance to actually move them. And we know that we can move things with sound, basically.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of theories, and that's a very good one, yeah. In southern Siberia, researchers have found a massive wall of granite stones. Some of these gigantic granite stones are estimated to weigh more than 3,000 tons.
Wow.
Now, that's twice the size of the biggest one at Baalbek.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to know that the original name of Stonehenge, if translated, is Giant's Dance,
Yeah.
or the Giant's Ring. Stonehenge is a later Saxon name.
Yeah. Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Just by the sheer size of it, and also Woodhenge as well.
And of course, we also have the pyramids.
Yeah.
Massive, great stones used to build those pyramids.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe they built them as slaves.
No, they didn't. If you've ever been to Egypt and touched the hieroglyphics, you know that this was craftsmen that loved what they were doing. You would not put so much love and detail into something that you are having to do. That's just nonsense.
They couldn't even have cut the stones with the technology.
Exactly, without precision engineering, Jack. And, you know, we're supposed to believe that they got their little hand chisel and did it. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. Come on now, pay attention.
There's been experiments done with these bronze saws. And somebody said, oh, look, we could do it if we put some sand in the groove. And a day later, they gave up. You know,
it's not working. It's not even. You only have to be a critical thinker and be intelligent and do a bit of research to find that that is hugely unlikely. They weren't a slave race that built the pyramids. They weren't. They did it as an act of love, and they were artisans and craftsmen that built those and engraved them.
So how were these huge megaliths cut and moved? Now, we don't know. We can talk about an ancient lost civilization.
Yeah.
We can talk about technology from visitors from the stars.
Yeah.
And let's remember that the word Anunnaki means visitors from the stars. Those who
absolutely, it's spelled out for us, really, isn't it?
But that could also simply mean they arrived in an aeroplane, which could mean there was some lost civilization on Earth which had aeroplanes. None of it is proven. Nothing proves anything. This is the point. There's so many different.
Well, that's what's so lovely about theories, isn't it?
I love it. I love it, and this is why I'm not going to be dogmatic and say so and so is so and so, so and so was so and so. I wouldn't be that rude to other people who've got their own ideas. I said that very deliberately on the program I did on my own on Friday, and then some dick turned up in the comments. I've since removed it and told me, "Oh no, you're wrong. It happened this way," and then told me his religious ideas. So you know,
bless.
I mean, at least he could
Let's
have
just say bless.
At least he could have had the decency to say, well, I think so and so, not you're wrong.
Well, I just, you know, we have to agree to disagree sometimes, don't we? I want to just interject because there is a lot of very credible documented evidence that giant skeletons were found across America in the late 1800s. In New England, skeletons unearthed in ancient burial mounds were measured at between 7 and 10 foot. Well-respected newspapers reported these findings at the time, which points to the credibility of their source. In fact, there are several documented findings of giant skeletons from all over America in the past, with most reports coming from the turn of the 19th century. There is also evidence that the bones of giants measuring over 2 meters in height were fairly commonplace just by how much they found, and also the architecture, as we've already said.
Yeah, they were, and I'm going to quote from some of those newspaper articles shortly.
Okay. I peaked too soon.
Yeah, you were right. You were right. Anyway, giants are part of the Celtic mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, and don't forget we had the Titans, the Hindu,
Gulliver's
Buddhist,
Travels, Gulliver,
the Norse people,
yeah,
and even the Japanese Shinto tradition
Yeah, indeed.
it talks about giants. This is what you were saying earlier on, isn't it? They stories come from all over the world.
Yeah.
There's even an amazing video. I mean, this is recent, obviously, an amazing video from an old military parade in Japan, in which the Japanese proudly show a huge modern day giant,
Yeah.
parade him alongside the imperial soldiers.
Yeah.
And I'll show you a photograph of that when I get the YouTube version up.
Cool.
He was massive. He was massive.
Huge.
Soldiers only came up to his kneecaps.
I know.
It's been said that this giant was the last surviving member of a tribe of giants. So not gigantism, a tribe of giants who lived on a Japanese island. And there are many, many historical accounts of giants. Flavius Josephus, who I've mentioned before, the first century Jewish scholar and historian, described his people's move to Hedron and why they did it.
Yeah.
This is what he wrote. When they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. They were till then left a race of giants who had bodies so large and countenance so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing.
Well, if you think about what the voice of a giant would be like, you know, I've got a friend and she's tiny, she's 4'7", and her voice is a little bit squeaky because she's tiny. But I've also got male friends that are, well, they're not giants, but they're over 6 foot, and their voices are much deeper. So we just imagine, you know, what a giant would sound like. It would be quite
booming.
Yeah, exactly. It would be quite different to human speech, wouldn't it?
During the 1500s, when the Spanish navigators were exploring the coast of America, many sightings of giants were reported. Captains of Spanish ships reported these taller than average native people. And so did Sir Francis Drake, Captain John Smith, and several other noteworthy eyewitnesses, excuse me.
Yeah.
Now, this is what Captain John Smith had to say. Now, excuse my pronunciation on this, please.
Go for it, Jack.
I'm going to do it syllable by syllable. The Susquehannock Indians.
Yep.
Try and say that when you've had a couple of drinks.
Sasquatch.
No, not Sasquatch. No. This is what John Smith said. Are a giant-like people. They measured the calf of the largest man's leg and found it 3/4 of a yard about, not long, about. And all the rest of the limbs were in proportion. In 1519, Spanish explorer Capitán Alonso Alvarez de Pineda was mapping the coastline of the Gulf Coast, marking the various rivers, bays, landmarks, and potential ports for the incoming invasion. He found a large town and near it some 40 native villages. He described seeing many giants living in those villages, as well as a race of pygmies. Yeah, so you've got the full spectrum of the variety in human height in this one village, but as different groups within the village. Alvarez de Pineda describes the tribes that settled near the Mississippi River as a race of giants from 10 to 11 palms in height. And I don't know what a palm is, whether it's a
So
palm
your
that
palms, your hands,
palm
so
that
it's a
way, or
measurement. Yeah,
is
yeah,
it?
yeah.
And whether it's a palm fond, I
A
don't know.
stride is the same as a meter, but a palm is that basically.
And a race of pygmies only 5 or 6 palms high.
Yeah, yeah. Which would make sense, wouldn't it? If we're using that as a measurement.
Perhaps the most intriguing and widely known tale of real giants in the age of exploration began with an account concerning the great Portuguese explorer, Ferdinand Magellan.
Indeed.
No, he's not going to be telling porcupines, is he? In 1522, Magellan embarked on his most famous voyage in search of a good route to the Spice Islands. One leg of the voyage took him to Patagonia, right in the very south of South America. And here's an excerpt from Magellan's official chronicler, the guy that's got the job of writing all this stuff up. Leaving that place, we finally reached 49 1/2 degrees towards the Antarctic pole.
Yeah.
As they used to talk in those days. As it was winter, the ships entered a safe port for winter. We passed 2 months in that place without seeing another soul. Without seeing another soul. One day, we suddenly saw a naked man. Don't get excited, Annie. Of giant,
Depends who it is, really.
Of giant stature on the shore of the port, dancing, singing, and throwing dust on his head. The Captain General, Magellan, sent one of our men to the giant so that he might perform the same actions as a sign of peace. I don't quite know how that works out, but that's what he said. Having done that, the man led the giant to an islet into the presence of the Captain General, Magellan. When the giant was in the Captain General's and our presence, he marveled greatly and made signs with one finger, raising it upwards, believing that we had come from the sky. Now, where would he have got that idea from? That more advanced beings come from the sky. Where would he have got that idea from?
Interesting, because we know it's in our collective consciousness, isn't it?
He was so tall that we reached only to his waist, and he was well proportioned. I do wish this. Another interesting account from 1539 from the Spanish conquistador Hernando de Soto, who came face to face with various giants during his adventures through the southeast portion of what is now the United States.
Yeah, there's a lot of skeletons that have been found across America, particularly in the late 1800s.
But he came face to face with them.
Yeah.
While they were still alive.
Yeah.
De Soto had set out from Tampa Bay, Florida, with a contingent of hundreds of men. They allegedly came across tribes of natives ruled by giants. One of these was Chief Tuscaloosa. Now, if these were normal natives ruled by giants, we can assume that the giants probably were the result of gigantism, can't we? Because the rest of the tribe weren't giants.
Yeah.
Chief Tuscaloosa was captured and said to be a hulking giant of a man who towered over all others. After being taken hostage by the Spanish, he organized a surprise attack on his captors, but sadly was ultimately defeated. There were also reports of another conquistador, Hernando de Alarcon, who was looking for a river that could be used to move supplies to Spanish troops along the coast of California and Mexico. De Alarcon would eventually make his way up the Colorado River all the way to the Grand Canyon. During this journey, he and his men were supposed to, we don't know whether it's true or not, came across a tribe of around 200 giant warriors, standing up to 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
Apparently they were very aggressive, but Alarcon appeased them with gifts. Another conquistador, all these stories are coming from the conquistadors, Francisco Velcarez de Coronado y Luján. You give him his full title.
Okay.
They do love their names, don't they?
Mm.
Also,
Well, if you had such a luscious name, you'd probably love it as well.
Absolutely, I would.
Our names are quite brief. Jack Cox, Annie Day. Doesn't really stretch out, does it?
Does it? Nah. Coronado, Velcarez de Coronado la Luján. That sounds beautiful. I do love the Spanish language. It's
me too, darling.
We're also told of having come across whole tribes of giants during his quest throughout the American Southwest in search of the legendary El Dorado. A little aside here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about El Dorado, because a lot of people don't understand what it is. Obviously, it means the golden one. Yeah. But in the 16th century, it was originally thought to be, he was originally thought a man, El Dorado, a 16th century tribal chief of the indigenous people of part of what is present-day Colombia.
Yeah.
Who, in an initiation rite, covered himself with gold dust. The legends surrounding El Dorado changed over time as it went from being a man to a city to a kingdom and finally to an empire. They failed to find El Dorado, but they did find physical evidence of giants. And here's another one. Conquistador Bernal Díaz de Castillo recorded the conquest and subsequent collapse of the Aztec Empire. He talks of a race of giants that were claimed by the native people to have once inhabited the area. Now, he didn't see these himself, but the chief of the tribe showed them the remains of these giants, saying that ancestors had told them the stories of these very tall men and women with huge bones that had once dwelt among them, but because they were bad people with wicked customs, they had fought and killed them. They produced the leg bone of one, which was very thick and the height of an ordinary sized man. I'm quoting now.
Yeah.
And that was a leg bone from the hip to the knee. I measured myself against it, he says, and it was as tall as I am, though I am of reasonable height.
Yeah.
They brought over pieces of bone of the same kind, but they were all rotten and eaten away by the soil. We were all astonished by the sight of these bones and felt certain there must have been a race of giants in that land.
Indeed.
Okay, more recently, this is what you were talking about earlier, Annie. Okay. More recently, in the 19th and 20th centuries, newspaper reports announced new discoveries almost every year.
Yeah.
This was at the time when America was being settled, although there were also reports from Britain, Europe, and other places around the world.
Yeah, sure.
At the time, it was quite normal to find bones of giants in America as well as in Europe. The New York Times in particular wrote many newspaper articles about the discoveries of giants, such as The Bones of a Giant, which was published in May the 25th, 1882. I quote, "The skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound." Okay. The skull of heroic size and singular formation has been discovered among the relics of the mound builders of the Red River Valley. The mound was 60 feet in diameter and 12 feet high. Near the center were found the bones of about a dozen men and women, mixed with the bones of various animals. The skull in question was the only perfect one. There were found some abnormally large body bones. The man who bore it was evidently a giant. A thorough investigation of the mound and its contents will be made by the Historical Society. That's that newspaper article. Let's have another one. May the 5th, 1885. Last week, a small mound near Homer was opened by some schoolboys who found a skeleton. Today, a further search was made, and several feet below the surface of the earth is a large vault with a stone floor and bark covering, where were found 4 huge skeletons, 3 being each over 7 feet in length. And another one from the San Antonio Express, telling it about a giant skull that is twice the size of a normal human, and included a picture. The article reads, "Beach giant skull unearthed by workers near Victoria, believed to be the largest ever found in the world." So the Texans had a giant living on the beach a long time ago. Large skull recently unearthed on a mound in Victoria County, believed to be the largest human skull ever found in the United States and probably the world, twice the size of the skull of a normal man. The fragments were dug up by a W. Duffin, an archaeologist who is excavating the mound in Victoria County under a project sponsored by the University of Texas. So these are sensible people, you know, these aren't idiots.
Absolutely.
In the same mound at the same level, a normal sized skull was also found. The pieces taken from the mound were reconstructed by, it says here, by the WPA laboratory. I've no idea what WPA stands for.
No, me neither.
Under the supervision of a physical anthropologist. A study is being made to determine whether the huge skull was that of a man belonging to a tribe of extraordinarily large men, or whether the skull was that of an abnormal member of the tribe, as in the case of gigantism. They actually say that in the article.
Okay.
Another article from the New York Times, written in 1897, reads, "One of the 3 recently discovered mounds in this town has been opened, and in it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones once measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation.
Yeah.
The skull was as large as a half bushel measure." Anyone remembers what a bushel was?
I do indeed.
Showing
Bushels and pecks.
you're showing your age now.
Oh, I don't care. I'm very proud to be the age that I am, looking as magnificent and wonderful as I am, Jack Cox. And
so
anyway, we've already
and so
talked
modest.
about this. We've already talked about this. You're 9.5. I'm 6. We're going by shoe size, darling.
In that case, I'm only 9.
Okay, okay, then you're only 9 and I'm only 6. That's great.
Some finely tempered copper rods and other relics were also lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet wide and varies from 6 to 8 feet. And with the 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon. This article now from the St. Paul's Globe, written in 1904. Bones of a human skeleton 11 feet high are dug up in Nevada. Workmen engaged in digging gravel here today uncovered at a depth of 12 feet a lot of bones, part of a skeleton of a gigantic human being. Dr. Samuels estimated them and pronounced them to be the bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height. Wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alleyway.
They might have been like the BFG. They might have been really gentle, magical giants. They might have been.
This article talks of a giant skeleton found in a cave in Mexico. Charles C. Clapp, who was recently returned from Mexico, where he's been in charge of Thomas W. Lawson's mining interest, has called the attention of Professor Agassiz to a remarkable discovery made by him. He found in Mexico a cave containing some 200 skeletons of men, each above 8 feet in height. The cave was the burial place of a race of giants who preceded the Aztecs. Mr. Clapp arranged the bones of one of these skeletons and found the total length to be 8 feet 11 inches.
Yeah.
Another article now, 1892, from the London Globe, talks of a discovery of a race of giants in modern-day France. In the year 1890, some human bones of enormous size, double the ordinary, in fact, were found in a tumulus of Castile. They have since been carefully examined by Professor Kinner, who, while admitting that the bones are those of a very tall race, nevertheless finds them abnormal in dimensions and apparently of morbid growth, whatever that means.
Well, some of the bones that have been found, the dot overlords have said, oh, they were elephant bones and they were this and they were that and they were the other. Oh, from Andrew, hold on. This says Robert Pershing Wadlow, February the 22nd. Oops, I've lost it again. Let me get it. Hold on. Robert Pershing Wadlow, this is from Andrew, February the 22nd, 1918 to July the 15th, 1940, also known as the Alton Giant and the Giant of Illinois, was a man who was the tallest person in recorded history, from whom there is irrefutable evidence. He was born and raised in Alton, Illinois, and small city near St. Louis, Missouri. Wadlow's height was 8 foot 11 and a half inches, while his weight reached 439 pounds at his death at age 22. His great size and his continued growth in adulthood were due to hypertrophy of his pituitary gland, which resulted in an abnormally high level of human growth hormone. Even by the time of his death, there was no indication that his growth had ended.
Yep, that's a good one, Andrew. That's a good one, yeah. In 1516, a skeleton about 30 foot high man, was found near Palmero in Sicily. But no scientists and archaeologists are pretending that none of this ever happened. Why?
They don't want us to know the truth about anything.
At the time these discoveries were made public, but once the skeletons were brought to the respective museums and historical institutions, they completely disappeared.
Yeah.
No one ever
lost them. How very convenient.
they're up. Yeah. No one ever talked about them again.
Yeah.
Till today. Almost all of the North American discoveries end up in the Smithsonian Institute, never to be seen again.
Yeah, to be lost. Oh, we don't know what we've done with it. Where did we put this huge artifact? Come on now. We all know how museums work. Everything has to be fully detailed about what exactly it is, what dates, all the dimensions of it. To then go, oops, we've lost it, really is not credible, is it?
This is the story of the one that you were talking about earlier, the San Diego giant.
Yeah.
One famous discovery of a giant, which was also covered up by the Smithsonian, is the San Diego giant from 1895.
Yep.
Which was 8 foot 4 inches tall. It was a mummified giant. There's even a picture of this giant mummy.
Exactly.
Which you've told us about, which was shown in many newspapers.
Yeah.
The mummy, this is the interesting part, the mummy was inspected by many scientists.
Oh, this is a message from Andrew. Shall I read this?
Go on, Andrew.
So, oops, let's get to the top. The Supreme Court ordered the Smithsonian Institution to disclose that it destroys several giant skeletons in the early 1900s to preserve the mainstream narrative of evolution. And Mr. Darwin again.
That's interesting.
And there's a link there as well. Snopes.
Right. Can you send me that? Because I'll look that up.
That's going to have to be up to you, Andrew. I've no idea how to send that to Jack.
You can.
But I'm sure you
can. Me on Messenger, Andrew.
Okay, Andrew. You're in charge of the IT stuff.
Now, the point is the mummy was inspected by many different scientists. We're talking about the Diego giant again now. It was purchased by the Smithsonian for a lot of money 13 years later in 1908. When the mummy was being exhibited, imagine our surprise, the Smithsonian ran some tests and suddenly dismissed the whole thing as a hoax.
No, it's not.
Saying it was made from gelatin.
Yeah.
The fact that it took that long, and after spending so much money to inquire it, plus the fact that it was carefully inspected by experts 13 years earlier, it just suggests there might be more to the story than we're being told.
Absolutely. Andrew's just sent a message, Jack, that says it will be in the chat document in Zoom if you download all the files. This is from Andrew.
Oh, Andrew.
On the 3rd of September, this is from Andrew. On the, oh, hold on. Oops. On the 3rd of December 2014, World News Daily Report published an article titled Smithsonian Admits to Destructions of Thousands of Giant Human Skeletons in the early 1900s. In that article, the site reported the Smithsonian Institution colluded with unspecified parties to suppress information proving the existence of giants, and the Supreme Court ruled in 2014 that documentation this discovery be declassified in 2015.
That's interesting, Andrew. That's brilliant.
Isn't it?
It is. It's good that it's been documented, that we know it happened, that it's not just us conspiracy theorists saying it. but that it actually happened.
Well, we know that the CIA came up with that phrase, so I'm really very uncomfortable with that. I think you posted the other day that conspiracy theorists just means you need to do a bit more research.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So let's move away from the American stories now. Let's look at some of the evidence in stone. In South Africa, there's a giant footprint. But anyway, there's a giant footprint in South Africa discovered in 1931 by a farmer called Stoffel Coetzee while out hunting. It's remained one of the most controversial sites in archaeology and geological research. The footprint, and this is just a foot, is about 4 feet in length, which suggests the creature who left it would have been between 24 and 27 feet in height.
We've just had a message from Cheryl to say that she's copied and pasted it and sent it to you in Messenger.
Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate that very much. Thank you. The footprint is actually vertical, so it means that the rock strata has moved. It's been pushed up. The footprint is known to locals as the footprint of God, or Goliath's footprint, and stories of ancient giants are told all throughout the region. Skeptics reject the giant footprint, claiming it was formed by natural erosion. A certain Professor Peter Wagner of the Port Elizabeth University in South Africa said that there was a higher, this is good, listen to this. There was a higher probability of little green men arriving from space and licking it out with their tongues than of it being created by natural erosion. I love that, absolutely love it. So in brief conclusion, because we've gone way over time as usual, do giants still exist today? Well, yeah, there are loads and loads of cases of gigantism, and I haven't included all those in this talk because that's not really what we're talking about, although I've mentioned a couple of them. Now let's take a look at an event which may or may not have happened. It's not reliable. In Afghanistan in 2002. This one still remains classified by the US government to this day.
Which makes you wonder why it's still classified, doesn't it, Jack?
Makes you wonder why it's still classified. It makes you wonder. It was reported,
why you would want to hide more information from us.
If they want to. It was reported by an anonymous, and some of them, and then, in all fairness, we must say an anonymous whistleblower is an unreliable one. No, he wouldn't be anonymous. But it still might very well be true. Maybe he just wants to save his job or doesn't want to be assassinated.
And maybe, I was going to say, perhaps he doesn't want to die of a suicide. That wasn't absolutely. A suicide.
Suicided. Yeah. I love that verb. The story is told of a US Army squad in the Afghan war that went missing. The Special Ops Task Force was sent to find out what happened, and the soldiers walked along a rugged mountain trail, arriving at the entrance to a cave. Around the entrance of the cave, there were pieces of broken military equipment and scattered gear with traces of blood on them. The task force was about to enter the cave to search for their missing comrades when a 13-foot redhead again,
redhead
like you, not like me.
Like me.
I'm a greyhead. When a 13-foot tall redhead double-toothed humanoid emerged and attacked them. the whistleblower claims that the giant pierced one of the soldiers with his long spear, killing him. The others then killed the giant by shooting him in the face. Once the giant was dead, the task force went inside the cave and found remains of their comrades. Now, the whistleblower says, and this is the words of the whistleblower, and I'm going to pick them apart in a minute, leading the military to think that the creature was cannibalistic. But they've already said it was a humanoid figure, not a human.
Yes.
So how could it be cannibalistic if it's getting humans and it's not a human itself?
Exactly.
In order to be a cannibal, of course, the giant must be assumed to be fully human. Homo sapiens sapien, and not some other humanoid species. We're told that the body of the giant was loaded into a helicopter and transferred to a secret location in the US to study. And that's the last anybody has ever heard of it. So if there was a living giant in the caves of Afghanistan, and if there was one, there must have been more than one. And I've heard other reports, by the way, that they didn't just come across it, they went looking for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I've even heard it claimed, and I'm not saying I agree with this, that the Afghan war was a cover for that.
Wouldn't surprise me. They'll go to great lengths to hide as much information as possible from us.
Personally, I think that's going too far, but I've heard it said. But if there
Is there ever a good reason to have a war?
But if there were giants living in Afghanistan, are there giants elsewhere? I just want to stick in here about the Sasquatch. You mentioned Sasquatch earlier, which I don't think anybody would claim that Sasquatch is Homo sapiens sapien. Maybe
well, Andrew had put in the comments Yeti.
Well, the Yeti and Sasquatch are the same thing, aren't they? Probably. What I am going to say is, although if you saw a living one, you wouldn't mistake it for a human, would you mistake the skeleton of one for a human? I'm just asking that question. What do you think, Annie? What do you think, Andrew? Anybody?
I think
Anybody?
It could look like one, couldn't it?
Joel, any ideas?
Look like a human skeleton. That's why I put the Yeti.
And again, you could easily conclude this, couldn't you, just by doing forensic pathology or forensic?
I mean, officially, nobody has yet found a Sasquatch.
From Cheryl to everyone, yes, possibly yes.
Yeah. Officially, there's never been a Sasquatch actually found alive, or a corpse of one that's been examined. Unofficially, of course, there's been loads of evidence, but officially there's not. So it's hard to do the comparison. I believe they exist. It's been suggested they might be Homo gigantopithecus, which was thought to have been extinct, I don't know, thousands of years ago, 100,000 years, I think. But there may be a few survivors. I mean, we find evidence of extinct creatures still alive every year in places like the Amazon, and places, animals that were thought to be extinct have been found alive. And in the oceans, in the deep oceans.
Oh yeah, the chambered nautilus is millions of years old. And
so
it
it's just another
today.
possible explanation. If these giants were Sasquatch or Yeti, whatever you want to call them, in different parts of the world, there's versions of them all over the world. There's versions of them in Europe. There's versions of them in Australia. They're all over the world. If the skeletons are similar to humans or even identical, then it would be very hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Even if they don't look anything like us while they're alive. Just a thought. Maybe absolute rubbish. Maybe the skeletons are completely different. I don't know.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
In your research, have you found anything to suggest why they've all gone?
Well, maybe they haven't all gone. I mean, we talked about that one in Afghanistan, didn't we?
Not the Yeti. I'm talking about the giants. We've been talking the vast amount of stuff that you brought to us tonight that that tells us of historical the stories of so many different giants all over the world.
Yeah.
Where are they now? Is there anything in the research that you've done that suggests the way that these beings are no longer, these human beings are no longer here?
I'm not saying that, Andrew. I think they might well still be here. There was another one photographed or filmed in Portugal a few years back.
But we were talking about hundreds of them, weren't we? Not one, hundreds of them being found, skeletons being found in caves and so on.
Yeah. Their population has certainly, if they ever existed, their population has clearly been decimated. The Native Americans talk about their wars against them, where they thought they'd killed them all out. Also, maybe they're just shy, like Sasquatch, like so many animals, like so many creatures, beings. They don't want to be around humans, and who can blame them? Maybe they're keeping out the way. I don't have all the answers, Andrew.
No, I just wondered if you'd seen anything in your research that suggested why they were no longer part of the human community. It seems to me that if you ever did go into battle with the giant, they have an advantage over us smaller people.
Indeed.
Well, yes. Some people have suggested they were fairly dim-witted. I don't know whether that's true or not, because I've never met one. And that would be judgmental anyway. But I mean, that could have something to do with it. But the Native Americans certainly believed that they'd killed them all off in North America until they exist in other places. There's more questions than answers here, clearly, and a lot more work needs to be done. If anybody wants to finance an expedition, let me know. I'd love to have an expedition to find these creatures, but or even Sasquatch, come to that. We might as well talk a little bit about Sasquatch while we're here. I have suggested it might have been Gigantopithecus. It might not have been. I had a long talk with a Norwegian friend of mine a few years ago, and we decided between us that they were probably the origin of the stories of the trolls.
Yeah, it's plausible, isn't it?
So who knows? Who knows? More research needs doing, and it's going to be very hard to finance it, I think, because the official institutions don't want to know.
Well, no, of course not. They just want to keep all the sacred, mystical, magical information about our Earth away from us, basically, don't they?
Mm.
That's my viewpoint of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And also scientists, of course, we talked about this very much when we were talking about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis.
Yeah.
Scientists don't want to sit their necks out.
No. Well, they
because
lose their funding, don't
they
they?
lose their funding and they lose their credibility.
Yeah.
There was, I mentioned the Clovis first hypothesis that was very popular 50, 60, 70 years ago, where the Clovis Native Americans people that were supposed to have come across the land bridge during the Ice Age was supposed to have been the first humans in the Americas. And that is, of course, now completely disproved. But it was, you couldn't get funding to dig any deeper because everybody knew there was nothing there. I love this, everybody knows, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Look into it, everybody knows. And one of the scientists who was involved in doing that work lost his funding, lost his credibility, was made a laughing stock for the whole of his career until he was a very, very old man, and his work was, was justified.
Well, they're doing it now to Dr. Vernon Coleman, aren't they? Completely rewritten his biography.
They have, yeah.
And just ridiculed him and done all sorts of things. Anyway, it won't stop us because we're truth speakers.
Yeah.
We're truth speakers.
Yeah. But this is it. I mean, scientists close ranks. It's very hard to get any reliable information out of Egypt because Egyptologists close ranks. And you come up with an alternative theory, such as the Sphinx weathering. What was the guy's name? I can't remember his name. Robert somebody. Dr. Robert.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember his name. Schultz? No, not Schultz. Shook, Robert Shook.
That's it.
And he was completely rubbished by all the official channels, all the scientific papers, because he thought he really noticed something they hadn't noticed: the weathering on the base of the Sphinx, which proves it must have been originally built, carved out during a time of great water.
Yeah, the flood theory.
Certainly not the desert that's there now.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just the way scientists work, unfortunately. As a very, very brief aside, because I really don't want to go into this in any depth on this show, it draws into question everything we've been told the last couple of years, doesn't it?
Oh, without doubt.
We can't trust mainstream science.
Not really science, is it? When you already know what outcome you're going to come up with based on who funded you.
Well, of course, everybody knows if you censor the people who believe something different.
Yeah.
All scientists agree if you censor the ones who don't.
Yeah.
Same with climate change. I've told the story on here before when I was at university, and my professor taught global warming theory as it was then.
Yeah.
And there was an inner circle of students that hung around together. And he took us aside one day and he just said, look, I don't believe any of this crap. But if I don't...
Oh, it says, turn on the light, honey, we can't see you.
he turned around and said, I don't believe any of this crap. But if I don't teach it, I lose my job.
Yeah, that's it.
And that woke me up, and right back in my university days, which was a long time ago, of how science works. If you don't toe the line, you lose your job.
Oh, absolutely.
You lose your professorship.
And just the way grants are set up, if I give you a gift, whatever you decide to do with that gift in the future, that still is Jack's gift from Annie. But if I give you a grant and you don't come up with the research outcomes that I've told you you must come up with, I can pull the plug on your grant anytime I like. And that's what puts people into this ridiculous situation of not doing the real scientific work, and it really, yeah, it's
That's
very
right.
sad.
I mean, I'm not saying it's, you don't have to say necessarily, I'm not saying it isn't, you don't necessarily have to say that it's sinister. You just have to say that science is very conservative. And you don't go against, as a young scientist, you don't go against your elders.
Mm.
Annie?
I'm just sending a message to Andrew to say that the light's on now.
I'm back. Okay. Please like, share. I think everyone here has already subscribed, but the people who
Yeah,
might,
we have. Yeah.
people who might be watching later,
Yeah.
please subscribe if you're not already, because it helps us reach more people. On Friday, I'm going to be doing the show I didn't do last Friday. I've got my friend Karen Binks coming on to talk about inner child work.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Talk about shadow work. Shadow work.
Okay.
Shadow work. So please come and sit and come on for that. It's the same link. It's zoomjack.uk. All my shows are on that link, and it's the same time, 6:30 on Friday.
This is from Cheryl. It says, "Thank you so much for inviting me on here."
Well, I'm glad you were here. Really glad you were here. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we'll see you.
Andrew, just to explain, the reason I can't turn the light bulb on at the moment at this end of the room is I need a light bulb, and for that I would need to go and get my step ladder out the shed. I'd then have to get my bulb out, and to do that in front of the broadcast probably isn't going to be as funny as it might be when I do it on my own.
Too much information, Annie, too much information.
So hence the bulb at the other end of the kitchen works beautifully. This one not so much. Please could you send me, this is from Andrew, please could you send me the links to last Friday's shows, or oops, it's gone again.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Please could you send me the links to last Friday's shows, or are they just on YouTube?
Well, yes, they are on YouTube, but I'll also send you the link, seeing as you've asked. See as you'll have to do.
And I'll have fixed the light bulb as soon as this show's over.
Last Friday's show, by the way, I was looking into David Icke's new book, The Trap, and his assertion that we live in a computer simulation. And I was just showing a little bit more depth of understanding, if that's not too arrogant, around that idea.
Okay. We've just got another message from Cheryl. Where is the list subjects of the shows, please? Where is the list subjects of the shows, please?
We don't have a list of subjects, Cheryl. Maybe we ought to. Maybe I'll have to get on with that and do that.
It'll be on YouTube, won't it? Everything we discussed so far.
Everything is on YouTube. Although it's
that says okay, no worries.
Although it's not totally up to date, I will get it up to date. You can also go onto my website, lovenotfear.uk, and click on videos.
Wow, how exciting.
So I will try to get that up to date. I haven't done it for a month or so. And there's another comment there, Annie, if you can read it out.
It says, just so she can plan ahead.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell her what we're talking about next week, as we know already?
What are we talking about next week, Annie? We did say, didn't we?
Fairies and mermaids.
Annie's going to be giving us a talk about fairies and mermaids next week.
Hopefully Jack's going to help as well.
Well, I don't know. My knowledge on that is minute compared with yours, Annie.
Oh, this is from Andrew. About time. We're talking about fairies and mermaids, basically.
Well, do you want to say fairy blessings to everybody before we go?
Indeed. So I'm sending you lots of love and fairy blessings to all of you lovely people. Thank you, Jack Cox. Thank you for Cheryl and Andrew for taking part in it. And also thank you to all the people who will be watching this on YouTube.
Yep. Thanks to everybody who's here live. Thanks to everybody who watched the show later. In fact, you all might want to watch the show again later because I'll have all the pictures on it. Namaste.
Namaste.
Love you all.
Bye-bye.